The day was drawing to a close, and the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowd away, so that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside, to lodge and get provisions, for we are here in a deserted place." Good morning. Welcome to a short biblical reflection on the reading from the Gospel according to Luke chapter 9 in the lectionary verses 11b up to 17. It is about the feeding of the 5,000, the miracle of the multiplication of the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish. Looking at the literal context, the chapter 9 of the Gospel according to Luke begins with the sending of the 12 on the mission. And as I started from verse 10 already, it recalls that the disciples, the apostles, return and they refer to Jesus what they did. And then, therefore, Jesus went with them to a city called Bethsaida. The crowd heard about it and followed Jesus. Therefore, Jesus was curing, healing them, and preaching about the kingdom of God. And then, exactly from the verse 12, we have this miracle. In verse 10, Luke mentions the apostles, but in verse 12, he calls them with another term, the 12. And that change is meaningful because the whole story in verse 17 ends up with reference that the apostles, it means the 12, collected 12 baskets of broken pieces. That is, one basket for each of the 12. There is insistence on the presence of the crowds. The word is repeated, as well also corresponding term translated as all. Then the whole text is arranged. We can see a certain parallel way that in the introduction the disciples are expressing their doubt and they want to ask Jesus to send the people away in order that they could make provisions for themselves. But in verse 13, Jesus gives them the order, you give them something to eat. Then they express the doubt, we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish. And the next statement could be also a central part because it can be also translated as a question, unless we are to go and buy food for all these people. And Jesus answers to them, giving them order to put the people, to arrange the people in groups about 50. And there is this meaningful mention, this number 50, as well also 5,000 of men, because this number 5 loaves of bread corresponds to them. And then consequently, Jesus answers to or he takes the order which he gave to the disciples. You give them something to eat. Now Jesus takes the initiatives. He takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. After looking up to heaven and blessing them, he broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowds. In other words, Jesus now is teaching them, as I mentioned also, that chapter 9 of the Gospel according to Luke, it begins with the reference that Jesus sends the disciples on the mission, giving them strict orders not to take with them anything, just to go and trust in divine providence, as well also in human providence. Now, this multiplication of bread and fish, this miracle, is another lesson for them. The words, you give them something to eat, is like a call to trust, to put their trust in particular in Jesus, because he's with them. And now Jesus is teaching them. He multiplies the bread and fish and giving them this multiplied pieces of bread and fish in order that they could distribute is a very practical lesson for those disciples. And of course, on this occasion of the solemnity of the most holy body and blood of Christ, we can also see this Eucharistic reference as distributing the Eucharist, we participate in this multiplication. Jesus offers himself and we distribute his body to others. I would like to wish you a nice day, a nice reflection on this gospel.